Is it here? Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us either live or online. My name is Paul Gorman. I'm your assessor here in the city of Norwalk. And we're here tonight for what I like to call everything you wanted to know about reval, but you were afraid to ask. Our presenters this evening are going to be Gary Fields. He's the residential appraisal manager and our project manager here from Vision Appraisal or Vision Government Solutions. And directly to my left is John Valente. He's the commercial appraisal manager who was hired with Safe Ground Analytics to do the commercial portion of our 2023 reval. With no further ado, I will turn it over to Gary to start our presentation.
Thanks, Paul. Hello, everybody. My name is Gary Fields with Vision Government Solutions. I am the manager of the residential valuation that's going on as part of the 2023 Norwalk revaluation. I'll be talking primarily about the residential values and the process that we go through as part of a revaluation. And John Valente from Safe Ground Analytics will talk about the commercial properties and how we go about valuing those. So we have about a 25-minute presentation or so, PowerPoint presentation we'll go through, and then I'm sure there'll be questions. We kindly ask that you wait until we finish the presentation. We might be able to answer some of your questions as we go through. There'll be time to answer all your questions at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to dive right in. And I'd like to give you, this is just an outline overview of what we'll be talking about tonight. So we're going to talk about why revaluation, why are we even doing this process, right? How often is it done? What are the goals of a revaluation? What are we trying to accomplish by doing a revaluation? So we'll talk about that. The first step in the revaluation process is data collection. The data is very important. You know, how many bedrooms and bathrooms, and finished areas, the condition of the property, all those types of things affect the value of a property. So we're going to talk about what steps we took to verify the data. The next step in the revaluation process is market analysis. And so what data do we use to come up with these new assessments, these new values? How do we go about doing that? What are the approaches to value? So we're going to go through that in some detail. And then how do we review our values? How do we know that they're done a good job? How do we know that the values are consistent and uniform from one type of property to another? So we're going to take a look at that. And then lastly, we'll talk about the informal appeal process. That's coming up soon. We're in our final review right now, and the first week of December or so, we'll be sending out a notice to all property owners in Norwalk with their new value that's been set on their property. And you'll have the opportunity to come in and via phone, talk to an appraiser if you have a question or concerned about the property. So we're going to talk about how you can prepare for that, how you can set an appointment and all that type of thing. Kind of go through all the key dates that you're going to want to know about. So that's kind of an overview of what we'll be talking about. Let's just talk about a revaluation. Well, why do a revaluation? Well, the first, it is a state mandated process. All cities and towns in Connecticut do a revaluation every 5 years. So that's, and there's two types of revaluations. There's a statistical value update revaluation, and then there's a full revaluation. So, well, what's the difference? A full revaluation is when all properties are visited in the field by what we call data collectors. That's our staff. We have residential data collectors and commercial data collectors, and they go out and they measure buildings and they collect information. So that's really the step that we do there. So as part of a full revaluation. So in 2013, since we're doing a reval every 5 years, 2013 was a full revaluation where we visited the properties. In 2018, it was more of a statistical, where we just looked at the sales and we adjust the values. We don't visit every property. And now 2023, we're doing a full revaluation once again. And over the last year, we've had a staff out there knocking on doors and collecting information. That's basically the difference between the two. So, well, what is a revaluation? A reassessment is the process of performing all the necessary data collection, market analysis, and valuation steps to determine accurate and equitable values for all properties within the city. So basically what that means is it's an appraisal. We're going to appraise all the properties and come up with the fair market value of that property as of October 1st of 2023. In fact, when you see the word revaluation, the first part of it is revalue. Revalue means appraisal. So we have appraisers setting values and looking at market data. And, you know, the new appraised values, the purpose really is all properties, when we do a new appraised values for all properties, that translates to a fair distribution of the tax burden. Well, why do we use appraised values? When you think about it, your property value, when you get your tax bill, you have an amount of taxes that you pay. Where's that come from? Well, your value is based on the market, and your value. Let's say your house is worth 0.00001% of the total value of the entire city, right? So there's the tax burden and the taxes that need to be raised to pay for police and schools and fire and all that. That same percentage, if you own a certain percentage of the city, well, then that's the portion of the taxes of the tax burden you pay. That's pretty uniform throughout the country. All states that I'm aware of do the same thing. They value property based on the fair market value. So the goal really of a revaluation is to establish a fair representation of the value of your property as of October 1st, 2023. The thing to keep in mind though is that values can change differently. That's why they do a revalue, right? Not all properties change the same over time. So since 2018, properties can change differently, whether it's large houses versus small houses, or old houses versus new houses, inland properties versus waterfront properties, condos versus residential, commercial versus residential. There's all kinds of different properties, and they can change differently. So what happens is that inequities can creep into the assessment database. So by doing a new revaluation, this ensures that property owners are paying their fair share of the tax burden, no more than their fair share. That's the purpose. In fact, revaluations are revenue neutral. And basically, no new taxes are raised due to a revaluation. They just aren't. The budget and the amount that the city needs to raise to support the schools and et cetera is the same whether a revaluation is going on or not. This is about making sure that all the values are equalized up to today's market values so that you're paying, so that it's uniform and consistent for all the different types of properties. So that's kind of the reason for the revaluation. So the first step in the revaluation is the data collection. This is where we send the team of, you may have had someone knock on your door and they did an interior walkthrough, or you gave them information at the door. And they're collecting information, the kind of information that an appraiser would use in valuing the property, right? I mean, if you ever watched HGTV, I'm guilty of that. I watch that all the time, basically. And it's really to see what buyers are looking for when they're buying property, right? How many bedrooms, how big is the house, where are the finished areas, what condition is the house in? Those are the types of things that the data collectors and the appraisers are looking at as well. They're looking at each house and collecting information to use to set up to determine a market value. So we verify measurements, we gather exterior and interior information, including the outbuildings, and collect information, bedroom count, bath counts, finished, unfinished areas, and all of that. Now, of course, not everybody's home when we come to the property. So what we did do is we sent out data verification mailers. Here's a sample one here. To all, actually we sent them to all property owners, whether we got into the property or not. And had a pretty good response. We got about 8,000 of them back, filled out by property owners. So, and you can see this is the type of information that we gather when we're out in the field. So accurate data is very important when we're doing a revaluation. I like to look at it as, if you were to compare like a revaluation project and consider it as one house, the foundation is the data. accurate data means accurate. So it's very important that we do a good job. And we've been through the whole city. I think we're in pretty good shape there. So that's the data collection phase. Here's the other phases of the project. Market analysis, that's a collection of market data throughout the city. Comp sales, right? Ever had a bank appraisal done for a refinance or a purchase, you know that the appraiser goes out and finds comps. So we reviewed all the comparable sales. We look at costs of buildings. We look at income expense information for commercial properties. So that's a data gathering of market information that we can use to set values in phase 3 here and create tables and models to mirror the real estate market here in Norwalk so that we can value the properties that sold and that did not sell similarly, right? So that's the valuation phase. And currently we're in our valuation review phase right now. That's when we go parcel by parcel and check every property. We look at the data, make sure it's consistent and accurate. Then we compare that to the sales in each neighborhood to make sure that the non-sale properties are valued similarly to the sale properties. And then lastly, the informal hearing process, which is coming up shortly. We'll talk about that in detail. Okay, so there's basically 3 approaches to value that we use in appraisal. There's the sales approach. This is where we look at, we verify all the sales that have occurred throughout the city, property transactions, and we investigate them to make sure they were on the open market, they were qualified sales, they weren't between family members or foreclosures or anything like that. We look for arm's length transactions, what they call it, or qualified sales. And we measure trends that take place throughout the, how are the values changing over time? So we analyze trends since the last revaluation. And we group the sales by different stratifications, whether it's location, neighborhood, type of house. And then we analyze costs. What's the cost of constructing new construction today? You could have 2 houses that are same size, 2,500 square feet. They both have 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, but one might be built in 1955 and one in 2010, right? There's a difference there. So we have to apply depreciation to the properties that are older because the market recognizes that. If I'm going to buy a house that's older, that needs some work, well, then the market value of that property is going to be somewhat less. We also look at the land sales and as part of the cost approach. And then on the income approach, that's primarily for commercial property, whether it's office space, or retail space, or apartment buildings. And this is where we sent out income expense forms for properties to, how much the property will earn for rent or lease. That's important as investors are more looking at the income property. And we'll get into that a little deeper in a few minutes. This just gives you an idea of how the market values have changed since the last revaluation. This is a bar graph of the median sale price. And you can see here from 2018, kind of flat into 2019, and then it just kind of took off, right? So you can see here that property values, for residential single family homes, the average price here, median price is about 35% higher. The property values have really gone up. And you might say, well, why is that, right? So, it was from 2013 to about 2018 or 2019, the values didn't change all that much. It was kind of flat, maybe a few percent per year, depending on the location. But then we saw that, the interest rates really dropped, right? They went down to 2.75%, 3%. Market activity picked up. And then we hit the pandemic, right? There became a need for property. A lot of property owners started working from home, right? And they wanted bigger houses. So they started buying more houses. Urban centers, right? It was kind of somewhat of a migration out to the suburbs, right? To have more socially distanced homes, right? So that picked up. And then there was the supply chain disruptions that we had, right? That were buildings, cost materials went extremely high. So that slowed building of new homes and such. So all these things going on led to the supply issue, where currently we're about 45% lower as far as supply of homes for sale than we were prior to the pandemic. So that demand and that low supply has caused prices to rise. So, and that's been across the board. Expensive homes, inexpensive homes, pretty much across the board. So when you do get your new notice, you will see that the value is high. That does not mean your taxes will be higher. I mean, because the values have increased across the state. So you want to take a look at your value and make sure it's consistent with like homes. But the real estate market has really gone up and the values are much higher. Same thing with condominiums. Here's the median sale price of condominiums throughout Norwalk. You can see it's, again, about 35% or so. It's actually 32, 33% increase. But they're much higher today than they were back in 2018. Another way to look at that, to measure how values change. Sometimes during these informal reviews that we do, property owners will say, hey, I haven't done any work to my property, but it's gone up. How could the value go up so much if I haven't done any work? So one thing we do is we look at homes that have sold twice within the 5-year period since the last revaluation. So as an example, here's a sale over in the Central West neighborhood, sold on September 30th of 2020 for $512,500. And then it sold again July 28th of 2023 for $675,000. That's a 34-month period between sales, and it increased 32%. All of these sales that you see in this graph spreadsheet here, none of them had major improvements done to them. So we made sure that, obviously if somebody, flips the house and puts all kinds of work into it, of course it's going to suffer. But these properties did not have any major improvements completed between those sales, and you can see how much the properties are going up. So that's another way to measure that, in addition to the median sale price. Here are the condominiums, same thing. You look at here's a condo over at Philo Ridge, sold for $215,000 in 2019, then sold again in 2023, just this past summer, increased 35%. No work done to it. So the real estate market's much higher than it was back in 2018. So the next phase really is where we take all this market data that we've gathered and we create valuation models, right? Like building models, land models, depreciation schedules, outbuilding models, income models. We build tables and schedules so that we can apply the new values consistently across neighborhoods throughout the city. And we use a system called a computer assisted mass appraisal system, or CAMA system, is used to mass produce values, right? To mirror the local real estate market, basically. That, of course, computer systems only help with the calculations. Appraisers appraise the property. So we put in the values and it helps with the calculations. You can see here, this is just a quick map of the cities and towns that Vision handles throughout New England. We have about, we're closing in on about 500 cities and towns throughout 15 states, but you can see we have a heavy presence in Connecticut. We have about 75 to 80% of the jurisdictions throughout Connecticut use the Vision system to calculate value and to manage their data. So once that's done and the values are set, well, how do we test that, right? So what we do is we group sales and we put them together by their location, by neighborhood, their style of home, their age, as we talked about, their size, big houses versus small houses, quality homes, right? Really high expensive homes versus more modest homes. We look at the lot size of properties, how much does that affect the value? And there's certain standards that have to be met with the Office of Policy and Management, OPM, in Connecticut, called performance-based standards. So there is an oversight of how these revaluations are run, and we have to report back to the OPM our findings and our stats, so that the project is certified. So the other thing that the OPM does is they certify the employees that work on the project. So if you have a residential appraiser, a commercial appraiser, there's tests they need to take, classes they need to take in order to be certified to do that type of work. So just as an example, when I talk about, running analysis and how we compare, here's just a quick, I just did a couple of them here. These are, for example, here's the ranch homes that sold. There's 172 ranch homes that sold. You can see we're at about 96% of value. So our new appraised values, as compared to the sale prices for those 172 properties, we're at about 96%. And what we do is we stratify, we break down the sales by all these different groupings to make sure that all the different property types are valued at the same level of market value. Okay, so we know that things are consistent. So in this case, you can see, things are consistent between the different styles, between ranches and split levels and colonials and Cape Cods. We also do the same thing by neighborhood. Here are the sales that occurred in the Silverline neighborhood. You can see what level of assessment we are now. Then we break it down. Here's West Norwalk. And here's Strawberry Hills, Central East. So every neighborhood, we really break down the sales and we make sure that we're at the same level of assessment for all the properties throughout the city consistent. That's really the main goal of the revaluation. I'm going to switch it over to John right now to talk about commercial property, and then we'll come back and talk about the informal review hearings.
Thank you, Gary. So I'm John Valenti. I'm the commercial appraiser here in Norwalk for the 2023 reassessment. And commercial valuation is slightly different than residential valuation. Gary has shown you approaches to value that deal with primarily cost and income and sales comparison approaches, looking at sales data. We add another approach to value, which is the income approach. As many of you are aware, when people buy commercial properties or industrial properties, they buy them with the intent of investing them based upon the income that's attributed to the property. So we add that approach, which is known as the income capitalization approach. And it really involves the estimation of the present worth of anticipated benefits. So you're going to receive money from the future, and you're going to think, what is that money coming into me from the future? What is it worth to me today to buy this property? And that approach is used on a value of a commercial property by capitalizing the earning capability of the property. Here in Norwalk, we sent out income and expense forms. This is something that's done throughout the state of Connecticut. It's not just unique to Norwalk. Folks have to respond to these forms who own commercial industrial properties. If they do not respond to the forms, there's a 10% penalty in taxes for not responding to the form. So folks have filled these forms out and indicated what type of property it is: a shopping center, retail center, industrial building, multifamily building. They put down their gross income, how much they've received in terms of rents, what vacancy has occurred, and then what expenses they've had occur to the property to produce for us something known as a net operating income. And that's the formula that folks look at, or the number that people look at, to arrive at a value for a commercial industrial property. I thought I'd share with you some trends that are going on in terms of Norwalk for commercial valuation. It's slightly different than residential, which is a little more linear. There's more a trend that's going on with residential properties. Commercial properties have been a little more erratic and change and unstable in different markets. The apartments, however, as shown on this graph here, have had a steady increase in income. So rents have been going up since 2018. If you look at a 3-bedroom, it was around $2,600 a month in 2018, and now it's approaching almost $3,500 a month. So the increases of rents have gone up significantly for multifamily properties, and that would certainly indicate an increase in value. Office sales on the opposite end of the spectrum, if you look at the office sale price per square foot on the left-hand side, and back in 2018, they were selling between $100 and $150 a square foot. And now we're really pretty much back to that same level again. You can see an erratic change up and down. And one of the reasons for this certainly is the pandemic, where folks are not using office spaces. Office buildings are becoming vacant, and capitalization rates have increased because the mortgage financing has gone up. And when capitalization rates go up, the values of properties go down. The income approach is easily demonstrated by the calculation. You take the net operating income of a property, let's say it's $420,000. You divide it by a capitalization rate or rate of return. This is what an investor would use to come up with a value for their property to buy it. And in this case, it would be worth about $4.2 million. That's basically the income approach and how you value commercial industrial property. We spend a lot of time looking at property by property income statements. So they're site specific. We'll look at the gross income, the net income, and arrive at a value for the property. So it's not uniform. It's not a linear transgression of value. And now I'll turn it back over to Gary to talk about the final review phase.
Yes. So we are in the final review phase of the revaluation. And for the last several months, we've been checking parcel by parcel, checking the data, making sure it looks accurate, comparing each property to the sales in the neighborhood to make sure that the values make sense and they're consistent and uniform as you go down each street. So we've been literally parcel by parcel, and that's been with the state certified revaluation personnel of Vision and SafeGround. We also run various quality control reports to check various attributes of each property, right? So for example, there's properties that are under construction. So we want to make sure that we have the right percent complete. So we have staff going out and checking properties that have work going on to be sure that they're only assessed for the percentage of value that's complete as of October 1st of 2023. We also run check reports of what we call old to new reports, so we can look and see how the values are changing as we go down each street and within each neighborhood, and look for any outliers. Oh, here's a property that changed, went up twice, double. How come? So we go and look at it a second time. It could be that that property has some permits and they did some work to it and they had put an addition on the back, and that's an explanation. Or it could be that something needs to be corrected on that property. So we go through and we look at all the outliers and properties that changed more or less than the typical property. We also use GIS and aerial imagery to do some of our quality checks at the end. And a quick shout out to the GIS folks here in Norwalk. They were very helpful in supplying GIS information and aerial photography, that imagery that we used within the property. We actually integrated it with our system so that we could look at the values and the data graphically, right? So we use that as for quality control. We also can use that for running what we call thematic maps, which are color-coded maps by, in this case, this is just one example of a neighborhood map. You can see here we have a parcel that's coded, color, it's yellow here, and the whole neighborhood here is this pink. So that graphically shows us that there's an issue with that property. So we do that with all the different attributes, and we can make sure that the waterfront property is valued consistently, that they have the same factors, whether you're on the harbor or on the sound or whatever it might be. We go through each neighborhood and make sure that the land is valued consistently by color coding it on the map, and make it just a tool for us to find things and issues that might need correction or a second look or whatever. That's the final review phase, and that's what we're doing right now. We'll be wrapping that up by month's end. And then we move into the final phase of the revaluation, which is the informal hearings, informal review hearings. So just to go through that a bit and talk about the key dates that you can expect going forward. Assessment notices will be mailed out to all property owners the week of December 8th. So you'll get a new notice that will have your old value, your new value, a lot of information. We'll look at a sample in a moment. The informal review hearings will be scheduled between December 13th and mid-January. So anybody who wants to get their notice and is concerned about the value or thinks that, gee, I'd like to talk to someone about this, I don't think my house is worth that much or whatever, we're there to, we will set up appointments with anyone who wants to ask questions at all. And that's what the informal hearings are. So you can schedule your own appointments. We have an appointment scheduler online, but if you're not comfortable with that, we have a call-in center and a 1-888 number that you can call and we'll help you set up your appointment. The informal review hearings will be by appointment only, and they will be by phone. Okay, so once you set up your appointment, it'll be a time slot, you'll get a call from one of our appraisers. And then we'll go through how you can prepare for a hearing and all that in just a bit. Once the hearings are completed, in mid-January or so, we're going to send out a notice to all those property owners that had an informal hearing with us. And that will show them whether we made a change, right? Or we didn't make a change. So a new notice will be sent to anybody who has an informal review hearing. This is a sample of the notice here. This is what it will look like. There's a few things I wanted to point out here on the notice. Up at the top, you'll see a PID, PID number, or parcel ID number. And then you'll see an appointment type, whether it's a residential property or a commercial property. Those two things are important when you either go online and set your own appointment or you call for an appointment. Because we want to be sure that if it's a commercial property, we have a commercial appraiser, right? So you want to have the notice with you when you set up your appointment. So you have those two bits of information. You'll have your prior assessed value here from 2018, and you'll have your new assessment for 2023. Also on the notice, you'll have a website here. This is the BGSI website. And at that website will be the online database. And that online database contains all the values for all the properties. It contains all the data that was used to set your value on all the properties throughout the city. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. So a lot of resources in the notice, because you might say, geez, I don't know if this is the right value. I'm not an appraiser. How do I know? So there's ways that you can go in, and I'll show you in just a moment of how you can prepare for a hearing or just determine whether you even need to, right? And down here in this last section, here is the area where you would follow the instructions to set up an appointment, again, we have a 188 number here that you can call if you're uncomfortable using the appointment scheduler or whatever. So this is the appointment scheduler that you would go into. There's basically 4 steps to set up an appointment. Number 1, you would select the jurisdiction, right? Norwalk, Connecticut. We have multiple revaluations going on throughout the state. And then, as you recall, you want to list whether it's a residential property or a commercial property. You have to say that right on the notice. Down below, you'll have a calendar here with the dates that are open for appointments will be white. The rest will be grayed out. Select the date that you want. And then all of the appointments that are available on that date are over on the right. Simply click on one and you book it. That's it. And there'll be a couple more questions there, what the parcel ID number is and such, but you know, it's very easy to set up an appointment if you feel that the need to. So when you go into the online database, this is what it looks like. When you go to that website, the website will be on your notice, and you can enter the online database. There'll be a little introduction here, and you can search for your property by address or owner name or several other identifiers. And when you go in, you'll see all of the data that your property assessment was based on. There'll be a sketch of the property. And you could run a list and look at all the properties on your street. I got my notice about a year ago. I got my notice in the mail. I was like, okay, well, let me see. Should I make a hearing or what should I do? So what I did is I went on the website. That actually was a Vision client. So I went on the website and I quickly ran a street list of all the properties on my street, and I checked all the values. And also in there, you can run your own comps. I could look for any properties that sold that were the same style as my house, roughly the same size. And I pulled up the comps, and you know, the houses on the street were valued pretty consistently to mine. There were a couple of sales on my street, and my home was valued similarly to those sale properties. So I didn't make an appointment because they had to look like it made sense. It was reasonable. And that's really what you want to do if you're concerned. If you see the value and you're like, geez, I don't know if it's worth that, just go to the website, check out the other properties in your area, make sure it's consistent with the others. search for some comps. We have a tool there to find your own comps. And that's what property owners usually bring into the hearings, if we do have a hearing. No, I got this. They want to know why this property is valued less than theirs when they think it's a better house or whatever. So very informative website, a lot of information there. There's also a place where you can, we have frequently asked questions that we've provided answers to, and there's videos on there on how we set land value and how we set building value. And right on the website, you just go to this taxpayer information area, and you'll see there's all kinds of information about revaluation, how to prepare for a hearing, and all kinds of things. So you can find all the data very easily and get most of your questions answered right on the website. We also created some pamphlets. You bring any?
No, I can run back to the office real quick.
You might want to hand those out before they leave
Yeah,
a
let me go
little
grab 'em right
later,
now.
but whenever. We've created some pamphlets that most of the information we're talking about tonight is in there for you. Okay, so then just a little bit more about the hearings. Generally, they take about 10 to 20 minutes. It depends on the complexity of the property. If it's a commercial property, it may be a little bit longer, of course, because you're looking at income and expense information and all that. But, what do we do during the hearing? Well, we'll review all the data points that your property is this data correct? Any errors? Do we need to correct anything? You may come in with some comps that you got off of the website that you want to talk about and compared to your property. So we'll talk about that. The one thing we can't really talk about though is the taxes. Some folks come in, have a hearing, and well, the value looks all right, but what's this going to do to my taxes? Makes sense. That's what you want to know. But I mean, at this point in the process, we haven't made any final adjustments as a result of the hearings. Plus, in March or so, you're going to have the Board of Assessment Appeals hearings. So some values may change throughout that process. So the values aren't really completed yet. So the hearings themselves are all about the appraised value. Is it consistent with other like properties? And does it make sense as compared to sale properties in my area? That's what we're talking about during the hearings. We want to make sure the data is right and the value is reasonable as compared to other properties. During the hearing, property owners sometimes have, they may have photos or they may have a recent appraisal that they had done. We will provide a place that you can send that information to get that directly to the appraiser. Commercial property, there could be income and expense information or whatever, what have you, that is important that you want to have reviewed by the appraiser. So we'll have a place for you to send that, and we'll get that directly to the appraiser when you talk to. Yeah, so that's the informal hearings reviews that we do throughout December and mid-January. That's not the end of the appeals process, though. Certainly, when that's complete, you can meet with the Norwalk Board of Assessment Appeals. You need to file an appeal with them no later than February 20th. That will be in your change notice or online, where you can get the applications online or right here at the assessor's office. If you still disagree with your value and you want to take it to the next step, you can do it. Those particular hearings, when we get to the Board of Assessment Appeals, is handled by the assessor's office. Vision Government Solutions will handle all informal appeals, scheduling, mailing, and all that for the informals. So that's kind of a overview of the whole process. I hope it was informational and helpful. We're going to open it up, and if you have any questions at all, you folks can come up to the mic and just ask a question. And if there's a question online, you could hit the just raise your hand and we can switch to you and you could ask a question online as
So I have a couple of questions about some of the properties in Norwalk zoning changes that have happened, of which those the city feels that they've done a a great service to the owner. Sometimes it doesn't agree with the owner's use. So it actually, I think it's a downzoning of a property. How does the zoning changes play into the part of the neighborhood change of values?
Yeah. Well, we're talking residential zoning,
Commercial, residential, mostly commercial.
mostly commercial.
I have
general?
properties in the southern part of Norwalk where they changed the zoning out. And they changed it, I feel they devalued my property.
Is it
so-
more restrictive, the zone that it went to?
Well, from having a industrial one property to being neighborhood business, yes. It also limits my sales for what I can sell my property for in the future. So it's a specific question for me, but I know there's a lot of people in the same boat that are down there in that area.
Yeah.
So does the zoning change have any play of the valuation of the property?
It can affect the value of a property, yes.
Yeah.
So what you should do is come into a hearing to meet with myself or Mike Beckett, who's working with me, and bring in information to us about what's happened to the zone and how you think it's impacted you. Sometimes yields go down, you can't develop the property as much, you can't use it, as you said, for certain uses, and that
Right. Well,
prohibits
I
the
mean,
use of the
specifically
property.
have that issue
And
right
that
now.
might inhibit the value. There's a flip of that, though. When zoning occurs, it actually increases the value of the property because yields go up or other uses can come into play. So it's almost site specific or zone related. So I would suggest you bring that into the hearings. I suggest you do meet with us anyway. Even if you agree with the value, you just want to talk with us and we can go over that information with you.
It is a big concern of mine. Like I said, if you own a business and you do business in town, you want a piece of property to do that business, figuring you have a piece of property that's exactly what it's zoned for, and I can run my business out of there forever. But then all of a sudden they said, you can't move it, you can't change it, you can't expand it on that property. Your buildings can't get bigger. It becomes very restrictive, and it changes the value of the property quite a bit.
When the zone change occurred, though, didn't you have a right to appeal as you go down and look at the
Oh,
zone
yeah.
changes that occurred?
No, yeah.
You gave some
I went to
input to
3
that?
public hearings about it.
Okay.
All the neighbors in this whole area did the same thing. My block, they changed from industrial 1 to neighborhood business. For other zones, they went from industrial 1 to industrial 2. So they didn't change as much. There was 5 owners in my area that had a real problem with it. And that wasn't enough to make any change. They still let it go.
Okay, so
And
be
then,
as-
some of us don't have the funds to go in and fight now to change that.
so when you come in to meet with us, be as specific as you possibly can. Get the zoning regs before and afterwards and tell us exactly how you think it's impacted your business.
Okay.
That would be helpful.
For my property. That was one thing. And the other thing, I just a quick touch to ask, there's different market values in different areas at different times. 2008, the market dropped out and we lost a lot of value to properties that were very high. Right now, we have an influx of people coming in from New York where there's no appraisals and they're paying overpriced for properties, and you're looking at values of houses that might be inflated. So how do you adjust those values that maybe aren't quite accurate either?
I've looked at probably every sale that's occurred in the last 2 years here in Norwalk myself.
After the pandemic,
And
they went.
I can tell you, there are, on average, I'd say it's between 6 and 10% that property people are paying above the list price. And I've come across some that are dramatically higher than that, right? Where it might have gotten in a bidding war, right? And then the
Right.
price went way up through the roof. We're not going after, there's some outliers that we have like that. We're just not going to reach those sales. We're not going to put a lot of weight on those that sold for 30% higher than the list price. So we look at when we're doing analysis and looking at sales, we look at where they cluster, where the bulk of them. Right? There are outliers, exactly what you're saying, where properties, and you're like, wow, how did that sell for that? Right. Look, some
But
people
on a
can.
whole, though, the city itself was flooded with people of an influx of cash.
Yeah.
And a lot of the appraisals, things so overappraised values.
Yeah.
I mean, it still happens. People are going to banks now, they realize the interest rates are higher and the values are dropping.
Yeah, we've been waiting for the values to drop. The problem is right now is that the supply of homes is still very low. A lot of folks that want to buy a new home, right? They want to get to a bigger home, families getting bigger. they're in their current home at a 2.75% interest rate. Now, if I go to buy that big home, now it's 7.75. So like, I think I'll just wait this out, right? Until either interest rates come down or property values come down. So that hurts the amount of supply that's on the market as well. So it's kind of a weird situation. But over the past year, even in 2023, values are still rising. You're right, though. At some point, you would think that the values would, the high interest rates would cause the values to come down at some point. That's why they do revaluations. Some states do revaluations every year, like Massachusetts. So we'll just, we're going to base the values on actual market data, what those sales indicate, especially the sales that occurred in August, September, October, that just happened, right? And if there's any adjustment that needs to be made because of that, then we'll make it for the final.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm going to add to something that Gary just said. He used the word cluster, and that's a good term to think about when you look at these kind of erratic sales that go up and go down. And when Gary and I practice, we've both been around the business for quite some time. There's a definition of market value that we use, and it starts off by saying the most probable selling price. It doesn't say the highest price, the lowest price. It says the most probable selling price. So that's the standard in which Gary and I have to meet when we're looking at all these sales, some of which may be overinflated or under. They get good deals or they spend too much money. So I like the term he's using, clustered. That's how we look at data. Clustering, probability, it's in the range of reason. That's kind of how we think. So thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Got a couple of questions and a couple scenarios. I'm really not sure you'll be able to answer them. The first are the easiest. My understanding, the grand list needs to be signed by the end of January. Is there any contemplation that you'll need a delay, or is this you're on track to deliver? Because I know in a lot of towns they've delayed, and it backs people up with respect to informal hearings and then the appeal process.
I believe we're on track to be able to sign on time. We are prepared that if for some reason we have to delay, typically a reval year is a year that you would ask for.
I know you have to apply to the state.
And put everything behind by a month, but the other side of that coin is, I could put in for a delay to sign by, I think we actually have till February 29th this year,
Yes.
it'll be here. That doesn't mean that I can't sign on February 7th and start the process right then and there. It just means that I have a month, I don't have to take the month. So, but as we stand today, it looks like we should be hitting all our target dates and we should be signing on time. I'm not guaranteeing anything, but the anticipation is that our goal is to be done by January 3rd.
And that if a phase-in would be considered, that has nothing
Don't
to do
say
with
that
you. That's the mayor and the council.
That's a
Right.
whole other ball of wax, and that's a dirty word.
So here's kind of my question. It's my understanding that you can use sales that occurred 18 months prior to the revaluation date, which takes you back to April 2022. And then that typically you want to focus on sales in the past year. So since October 22. And if I look at, say, if I cut that into 6 months, so April 22 to October 22, then October 22 to April 23, I mean, we're dealing with three very separate environments, as you mentioned, with interest rates. And this really reflects residential. That really in the last 6 months where rates have gone and velocity and absorption has slowed down because of how are you going to weigh those? I mean, the market may have actually been strongest in that period, from April 22 to October, or at least in 2022. That's where you're going to have the bulk of your sales, because within 23, things started slowing down as interest rates went up. And I understand that there's a time market adjustment. I mean, when you weigh these sales, I also understand mass appraisal is very different from a a singular appraisal report that's written. You have some different rules. You can use standard deviations. But how are you going to look at that when theoretically you're delivering a value as of October 1, 2023, but probably 70% of the comparables are going to be, maybe 9 months old. If a residential appraiser were delivering something to a bank and he delivered comps that were over 3 months old, they'd toss the appraisal out. They'd say, nope, we need newer comps. How do you address that?
Well, most weight are placed on the sales closest to the appraisal. Most weight is placed on that. Now, we need to report to the state as part of those performance studies I was talking about, the sales that occurred from October 1st of 22 to September 30th, right?
It's 12 months, not 18
At 12
months.
months. It's 12 months. That's why we looked at 2 years of sales.
Well, commercial, you
but
probably have to.
You know that with the values going up, you have to keep that in mind. And we actually broke it down similar to what you just said. We actually looked at, grouped all the sales. Remember I was talking about the groupings? We grouped them by quarter. So we looked at all the sales at each quarter, and you can see where we're coming in at as far as our appraised values are coming in as compared to the sale prices by quarter. So the most weight needs to be placed closest to the appraisal date. So those sales that occurred in August, September, October, those are the most important sales.
So here's another question. This one's a little more personal. So I own some investment 1-bedroom units in a complex of about 64 units, split 32 ones, 32 twos. The ones are garage units, English basements. The 2 bedrooms are nice townhouses. The ones were supposed to be garages. So in 2013 and 2018, both revals, you hit the 1-bedroom numbers were hit very fairly. The values were very fair. The 2-bedroom units were egregiously underappraised. As you understand, when that happens, when something's underassessed, has lower taxes, which actually increases its value. So this split has widened. So my question is, when I understand you're looking at 2-bedroom units, you're comping 2-bedroom condos. When you're looking at ones, you're comping ones. But do you ever then go and look within a complex itself? When you get those final assessed values, appraised and assessed values, do you ever then go into the complex and say, I know that we're looking at the city as a whole, but within the specific complex, have we gotten this ratio right?
That is exactly.
Okay, good.
In fact, I know because I did the work personally. I literally went condo complex by condo complex. Took me about a month to go to everyone, looked at all the sales over the last few years. And I know some of them are older sales, but some complexes are fairly small and they don't have any recent sales. Right? So I got to so if they didn't have a lot of recent sales, I went back in time and then time trended them based on what the market's been doing based on those.
I mean, I've seen it in a few others also.
Yeah.
Just it looks like there was a trend from a neighborhood that was applied.
Or in some of them, there just aren't any sales hardly at all for
Right,
a long time. So I would
I
look for, what I did is I looked for other complexes that were the same size and are reasonably the same. The location matters most in a similar area. So as I went through each complex, I would, especially the mixes, because some are townhouses, some are flats, some are different types. So I would group the sales by type and then adjust based on what the sales told us for the 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms. Some complexes, you got some that are facing the water. On the other side, they're facing the parking lot. People's headlights shining in their windows. So really had to break it down by those items, by each complex. What are the value drivers for each complex? And then break the sales down and then adjust them appropriately. So that's what we
I
did.
clearly understand you can't come in with an appeal and say, my neighbor's house is assessed less than mine. But this was a case where the 2 bedrooms were so egregiously underappraised. But the 1-bedroom owners couldn't go in and say, hey, there's a problem here because it's not our issue. But in a whole, because the 2-bedroom owners control so much more of the association and their values are higher, They control the board. And unfortunately, what they do is they say, oh, we're just going to keep our values upstairs and not bother downstairs. And, had their
Right.
taxes been a little higher, I think they would have taken a little more interest in the complex as a whole. Thank you.
No, it makes sense. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that'd like to speak? Yeah, thank you.
So I had a lot of questions in 2018 when basically taxes went up. And I know we're not talking about taxes. I know that this is a percentage, right? So if something goes up a percentage, the expectation is everybody's going up that percentage. And then it's in some way sort of equalizing. But I'm still curious, do we know if people should expect, I'm a realtor, so people are calling me about this thing as a problem. So is there an expectation that I'm going to be getting phone calls that people are saying taxes are going to go up at the time that, if I didn't quite get when taxes would actually be determined based on this, but I'm curious if that's something people should expect, even though, again, it's not necessarily, the assessment is not necessarily based or used to determine what taxes would be.
I have been looking at the percentage changes by various areas throughout the city. I can tell you that overall, just overall value change for residential is about 35, 36%. That's where we are right now. We haven't finalized yet. It might change a little bit between now and December, but that's about what it is. I don't see any particular area like dramatically changing different than the typical, right? There's a range there in some areas, some neighborhoods are a little higher and lower than others, but property values have gone up for the expensive homes. They've gone up quite a bit on just the modest homes, the capes and subdivisions. Those have also increased. So it's kind of across the board, which is actually a good thing. So that there's not like a particular location or a particular type of property that's residentially that has changed dramatically differently. There are some differences, but it's been fairly consistent. Everything's higher than it was.
So should we expect people's taxes to go up relative, I don't know, phrase this. Let's say taxes go up by X percentage. Everybody who's gone up 35% is going to have that same increase in taxes. So it shouldn't be a dramatic increase for some and a dramatic, and a smaller increase for others.
Right. Usually, 5-year reassessments, most properties stay about the same. There's a percentage that goes up, and then for any that go up a bit, the other side, they go down. So some are actually going to go down a bit. But all I'm saying is that I haven't seen a group of the residential whole bucket of properties throughout the city that, wow, this type is going up double, and the rest of the, so it's been pretty much consistent. There's a range there, but it's been nothing dramatic as far as a certain area.
And then the other question is kind of process, land percentage versus the house, right? The actual property. Obviously there's some, or maybe there's not some ratio. It's based on the size of the land, and that's how you determine the assessed value and the location of it. Do you take into consideration the lay of the land, for example? Maybe that property is not usable, and yet maybe another property is the exact same size, and there's a huge backyard that's flat.
Absolutely. And I mentioned earlier the GIS and the layers and the maps and everything that the city supplied us. They have topography maps. Just click on a button, and all the wet areas come up, blue. So when we were doing our review, we could see where there's wetland, where there's, you could have an acre of land, and the house next door has a half acre. But so if they're both flat, there's no steepness, and there's no wetland, you would think the acre would be a higher value. But if that acre has 50% of it is wet or steep, then it's basically the same price. So that means we need to make an adjustment on that acre lot because part of it is wet or steep, or there's some issue. Yes, that's exactly what we did. So we made adjustments Remember, parcel by parcel, we checked all those things, parcel by parcel, and made those adjustments.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else that would like to speak before we go to the people that are remote? Anyone? Yeah, please come up to the microphone. Thank you.
Very intrigued. I'm an appraiser. And in the last reval, there was a lot of lack of consideration for waterfront properties with Norwalk has a very restrictive, probably one of the most restrictive rules in the state of Connecticut. And now they're talking about doing just 25% over 10 years with waterfront homes. So there were a lot of overvalued waterfront properties in the 2018 because the city really wants people to knock down and build big versus the houses that are there, but they were being penalized the same way. How are you factoring in the fact that zoning has very restrictive waterfront ability to do any work on homes for people who want to stay in the area, et cetera?
Yeah, well, waterfront there's a number of sales of properties, you're an appraiser, so you know that. So what we do is we separate those sales, whether depending on what type of waterfront it is. So Wilson Point, facing the electric plant, or facing the islands, or down on Bell Island, or whatever it is. So we group those sales together and we set the values based on market sales. So if I'm a buyer and I buy a property, I should be an informed buyer. I know that, can I build? Can I add on to this? Of course, most of those properties moved down there. They're pretty built out, a lot of them, So, yeah, we look at that and but.
How are you doing that through mass appraisals? Because I don't understand that at all, because how Norwalk is set up right now, they encourage people to knock down and rebuild. So there's no land, nowhere for the water to go, drainage, everything, because they don't want people to take an existing structure and just do work to it. Because obviously you get a lot more taxes on the house that's knocked down and rebuilt, and much bigger on the piece of parcel that's 4,000 square feet next to the guy who's 1,500 square feet and might just want to put a garage on or renovate their kitchen.
Mhm.
So, but those people that are in that 1,500 square foot house that want to they're penalized. So you're using mass appraisals. So how are you factoring in that in this next reval?
Can I ask a follow-up before Gary answers?
Yeah.
I'm just curious because you're talking about restrictions about a person who has a 1,500 square foot house who just wants to do work, and that the city's limiting their ability. Are you speaking about like waterfront and the FEMA requirements?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to be out there. That's FEMA, that's federal.
Wrong. You're wrong. Because FEMA, no. Like if you move into Stanford does 50% over 5 years. Norwalk does. Now, Steve Kleppen has backed it up to where right now, as the code stands, it goes back to the existing structure from when it was built with his new person, Alexa, who's in there. So if the house was originally $30,000, you could only do 50% of $30,000 on the building. So are you following me? Are you not?
I understand what you're
Okay.
saying. I did
So
not know that was in the code
that-
because I've not read the entire.
You
ordinance.
should know the code because you're appraising those properties. You're assessing those properties. So that 1,500 square foot house is going to be, you're looking at it as the value of the land, the highest and best use of the land. But the reality is people want to stay in Norwalk. They want to live in their homes. They don't want to knock it down, put a 4,000 square foot structure on it, right? There's a lot of people who've lived their whole lives in those areas and they don't want to be penalized for it. And then last reval, they were totally crushed with how it was done. So what I'm saying is, how are you looking at those properties moving forward? Because it's a concern and it's really unfair.
Well, just to finish my portion of it, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna talk to Steve and get the ordinance, because when his office calls me,
Yeah.
they tell me it's 50%. They're asking me for the current value. They've never asked me for a value from 1932 from when a structure was first built. So I'm gonna have to refresh my memory and talk to them to get a better education. As far as how Gary's going to handle it with using it as mass appraisal, I'll let him speak to that.
Okay, but wait, back up 1 second. So now he's changing it to 25% over 10 years with the new zoning
What do you
code.
mean 25% over 10 years?
So now he's getting, so originally what you just said, 50% of the structure was how it was until Steve Kleppen hired Alexis, who used to come from the conservation department. Then she changed it to the original structure, because I know a lot of people who have called me. It's been a huge issue in Norwalk. And now he, in the new zoning rules, is now going to do 10 years, 25% of the building value, which is you have less money. It's insane. Norwalk is we're one of 7 waterfront communities who are so restrictive of this. It's insane. So what happens is you are taxing those people on those properties or in those waterfront communities that want to stay in their homes, like the people who are going to come in and knock it down. And there was no differentiation.
Right, you have to set the value based on its market value. That's the statute.
I get it. I get it.
There are tear down sales throughout the city. There's a small house sitting there, and the land is probably worth 10 times what the house is.
But then you have a mayor and a common council that are sitting there saying they want people to stay in their homes and
Yeah.
affordable housing and how that's a priority, blah, 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 blah. But then if it's affordable housing and all of that, what you're doing in the tax department is not going with what Rilling and the common council is saying, because those people can no longer afford to stay in their homes. And I get it, you're going by highest and best use, but the reality of the situation is those people have no option based on the zoning department.
Well, that's getting a little off track. of
It's a
what this
little off,
meeting was
it's a
about.
little off track, but the reality is you're doing mass appraisals on those houses, and that's with the understanding that they're gonna knock them down.
That's what the market calls
Right.
for.
So
very
you're doing
small.
your job,
Right.
but the city is not doing their job, and they're not in sync with what the elected mayor and the elected common council is asking for people. That's all I'm saying. And as an appraiser, I get the highest and best use, but the reality of the situation is that you can't take down every single house in the city of Norwalk and build a 4,000 square foot house and not have flooding, drainage, all of these other issues, and still be a productive city. So there's some of this that is gonna have to, like, you guys should be talking to the departments in this city.
I'm gonna talk to them tomorrow. Can
Okay.
I get your name and email so I can write you once I find out what I find out?
Sure, my name's Nora King, and my email is nora@noraking.com. I'm a big supporter of vision. But I'm also an appraiser that is my busiest city in all of Fairfield County. I have to tell you, is Norwalk. And it's not just because I formerly lived here, it's because how messed up it is with the waterfront properties. So Westport, I know you're formerly from Westport,
50% rural, current value.
and it's not my busiest place, but Norwalk, oh my God, I get calls from the minute you drop those notices, and I'm not trying to talk myself out of work, but I'm just saying, like, you guys need to get it right this time. So
That's our
there's,
goal.
so, anyway, but I think I just wanted to inform you of the things that I was seeing as an appraiser, because I think you
Yeah,
should.
no,
And I
understand.
get what you're
I
doing.
understand what
It's the
you're saying.
highest and best use
Yeah,
role. I do
it's
get it.
market value, and you make a good point, but it is based on what that property will bring on the open market.
Right. However, you have a mayor and a common council who
I-
is like, every day they're talking about affordable housing.
Mhm.
And you can't be asking people to like, look for affordable housing when you're forcing them to knock down their houses or something.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anyone else here that would like to speak? Otherwise, we're going to go to the people remote. I do see someone dialed in. So if you'd like to speak and you're dialed in to raise your hand electronically, hit *9 on your phone. The first person we have is Lucas. Lucas, if you can unmute. While we're waiting for Lucas, Diane, if you can unmute. Oh, Lucas is here.
Okay, so I have a question. So I received this letter and it shows 13 rooms in my house. 13 rooms include all of the bathrooms. This is the current assessment. It includes all of the bathrooms plus the unfinished basement. And in the current assessment, it shows that the basement is finished. If I make the correction, send the letter out, what's the next step? What's gonna happen?
Well, you may, on the letter, the verification form, there is a place for you to put a phone number. When we can reach you, there may be a question we want to ask about that. We want to be sure, especially if, sometimes in order to determine if a basement is finished or not, we basically look at, you have to have 3 of the 4 factors, whether it's floors, walls, ceiling, or heat. You have 3 of those.
Nothing is covered.
If you don't have any of that, then it should be unfinished. So if it's down as a finished basement, well, it shouldn't be. So send that in and we will make the change.
Okay.
Yep, that's why we send those out, just to make sure. But sometimes if it's a major change like that, we may give you a call just to reiterate what I just talked about as to what makes a finished basement, just to be sure we're on the same page and that it doesn't meet the criteria of a finished basement. So we have been calling property owners back when it's kind of a gray area and we want to be sure.
Of course, half of it is covered, half of it is finished. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, we make changes.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Diane.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit under the weather, so sorry for sounding kind of funny. I'm a residential property owner, but I actually have 4 questions regarding the commercial properties. They're pretty quick, so I'm hoping Mr. Valenti can answer each one. The first one is, I think it was Mr. Gorman mentioned that all of the data that you collect to make the assessments is available online through Vision. And I know there's a bunch of information there, and I wonder if that includes the income expense forms that you require when you're doing the commercial properties. That's my first question. Are those public record?
It does not include that. That's confidential information and wouldn't be released to the public.
Okay. And then my next question related to that is, what documentation would a commercial property owner have to provide you as backup for what they're stating their income and expenses are? Or is it on the honor system where they're just filling in the blanks with no either bank records or tax returns or
The best information to bring in is tax returns and leases would be really helpful to us.
no, I'm saying what information is required of them to provide you when they submit their income and expense report that you said they're required to give to you.
Yes, I apologize. The only thing that's required is to fill the form out. But
So the
if,
form is basically on the honor system. They just tell you what they,
however, when the assessor looks at the form, he or she may have a question about it and will request additional information. So that
okay.
can happen.
Okay, and if you did request additional information, it can be the type of documentation you just suggested.
Right.
that they might supply on their own if they were, say, disputing the value.
Right.
And that brings me to my next question. When they're submitting that document and signing it, are they signing that it's all true under penalty of law? And what would be the penalties for providing an assessment firm with a false or an inaccurate?
Yeah, they are signing that it's true and accurate to the best of their ability. And
And-
there is a 10% penalty for failure to file. And the question that you're asking about in terms of an additional penalty, I'm not sure that would be done with the courts.
Okay, well, presumably there's some statute. I'm not sure if our tax assessor knows it, but I would hope there's some statute that covers that for falsely reporting it. And actually just led me to my next question. So do you know roughly in Norwalk, or would our assessor know, what percentage of commercial property owners simply pay the 10% penalty and decline submitting the form?
I know, Paul, do you know?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I'm sorry. That's be something I would have to run a report on, and not something I just know off the top of my head.
Typically, people do respond because of the penalty. Connecticut's very unusual. It's the only state in the country which does a 10% penalty for failure to file.
Okay, the 10% penalty, is it 10% of the tax?
Yes.
That would be, okay. So if it was okay, I get it. And then finally, my other question is, I'm sorry, I didn't really understand the math. And oh, by the way, could I also ask, are you able to post the PowerPoint presentation that the slides that you used tonight, can they be posted to the city website? The assessor page or wherever tomorrow, that'd be helpful.
Yes.
My last question is in regards to commercial space, when you said that the math is done based on the income and expenses, if you have commercial space, and in this case, I'm thinking of retail spaces where there is no income because those spaces are sitting vacant for whatever reason, what is the computation then? Because 0 times, whatever in that formula you showed, if there's no income, how do you value that? Is it what you think the income would have been had they rented it?
Right, you put an estimated income, what it would be renting for had it been rented. And you put something in called vacancy, because it's got a vacancy problem, perhaps you may adjust for that, but you do a stabilized economic rent for the property to estimate the income. It wouldn't be valued for 0, it would be valued based upon its potential to rent.
Okay, and those computations and stuff would be available in the vision system, correct?
The computations are available in the system, yes, but once again, the confidential submissions on the forms are not available.
Right, but in the case of someone with 0 income, your computation based on, I guess, area, square footages for that type of space you would use, the average or something?
Right, the income would be placed there. It's an economic model showing what the gross income would be, the expenses, the net operating income, and then how it's capitalized will be shown in the system, yes.
Okay. And then I guess this last question is not commercial, but for the assessor. I've never quite understood this, but so for the 2023 reval, and we know about the anomaly of COVID. So if there's a high reval this year, which is likely, but let's say in 2 years from now, for God forbid, but say there's a real deep market crash and there's a dive in all the real estate values and house sales and comps and everything start to take a nosedive. Are taxpayers still saddled with the 2023 reval for the subsequent years of the 5-year reval? Or is there an opportunity in each year to, I guess the word is appeal, based on the new market? And I'll let you answer that. And I thank you all very much for holding this and for allowing us to tune in from home, especially in my case tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. I'm gonna ask John to help me with the answer to this question, because I believe there are conditions under which a city could apply to reval midterm. if I'm not mistaken.
There
But
are,
there's conditions that have to be met. It's not just the residential market took a nosedive. The other thing that I would like to address, as you call it, the COVID anomaly. COVID started in March of 2020. I'm a real estate agent by trade. Before I became an assessor, I also was a prior appraiser, but I let that go by when I took on assessing. When it goes on for 3.5 years, and even though the amount of sales has dwindled over the past 6 months, it's no longer a blip, it's no longer a bubble, it's the market. Sooner or later, you have to call it, it's the market. If 1,000 people overpay, and this is the kind of phone calls that I get all the time, well, I overpaid. Well, so did the last 50 people that called into me. They all overpaid. Well, that's the market then, because the market is people are outbidding each other. And everybody that's a real estate agent in the room loves it when the bidding war goes on, and the people love it because they got the house, but they don't love it when they see that, hey, they help influence the market trend. I live in Trumbull. Trumbull delayed their reval because they were thinking it might be a blip. Well, it wasn't a blip. All it was ever increasing. And so when they revaled a year later, my value went up an extra 10% over what it would have been. And I stuck with that for the 5 years. So I don't know, to get back to your original question, I don't know the exact parameters that it would allow us to apply to do it. But I know that there are certain conditions that have to be met. And if it were ever to just fall off the table, that's when we would start looking into whether or not it would be beneficial to the city to do it, because another reval comes with these gentlemen coming back, redoing the whole thing. Greg's guys having to approve all the money that goes into redoing it. And does it make economic sense for everybody that's involved, residents, commercial owners, and the city itself to do something like that? So, it's always something that could be in the back of your minds, but not something I know the exact specifics on right now.
it's a relative question. So we have a specific data value, October 1st, 2023. It will remain that way for the next 5 years until there's special legislation to remove the existing reassessment and then start another one. As Paul said, you'd have to go back and do a reassessment. But the reason why I say it's relative, it's a specific point in time that's going to stay that way. Let's say the market does collapse. Everyone's assessments were set at that specific point in time. So relative to each other, they're done fairly at that point. And so there may not be a need to change the reassessments and just lower everyone's assessment. It wouldn't necessarily change your tax burden. It would just change things relatively back and forth to the way they were before. So you could have something like that happen, but I don't see the real point of it. If you buy a car today, you pay $60,000 for it, your payment is $800 a month. 5 years from now, when the car is worth less, you're still going to pay $800 a month. It's the value of things change over time after the point occurs. So on October 12th, it might be a different value than October 1st, but our key date is October 1st.
And just one more addition to that, and that's the exact same reason with what John just said, why if 2 years from now, all of a sudden the market was up another 30% because there were another 10,000 people that went and overpaid, we wouldn't want to reval just to go out and get those higher values, because it's all relative. If everybody goes up 30%, it just means the mill rate gets changed to adjust for the added grand list value. There would have to be some sort of a shifting of where, like, one thing's going up, another thing's going down dramatically to even make it something that would be necessary. That answer your question?
All right, next we have Terrence. Terrence, if you can unmute.
Hi, everybody. Got two questions. One, how do you handle a property that is sold twice in 1 year? Do you only, do you average them? Do they both count? The latest one count? How do you go about that? And my second question is, has the weight of residential versus commercial in Norwalk, like 5 years ago, commercial took the brunt of, they're taking a larger share of the grand list relative to the time before. How has that changed with this reval? I know it's not finalized, but if you can comment on that.
Yeah, if there's two sales within the same 12-month period prior to October 1st, we'll use the most recent sale.
To answer the question about the ratio of commercial properties to residential properties, based upon the most current grand list before the reassessment, the commercial properties make up about 35% of the grand list, and the residentials make up about 65% of the grand list. We don't know what that's going to change to. It's already been illustrated to you this evening that the residential properties are going up in the 30% range. The commercial properties, it hasn't been fully analyzed how much they're going up or staying the same, and some may be even going down. So we don't know the overall effect of the change in commercial values.
When will you know that?
It'll be finished up during the month of January. So by the signing of the grand list, at that point in time, you will know what portion of the list is then commercial and then what portion is residential. It'll be after the hearings are completed.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if there's anyone else that would like to speak, please raise your hand electronically now. While we're waiting for that, we did have a few Q&As. I don't know if the same people. Okay. All right, if anyone else would like to speak, please raise your hand electronically now, or we will close public participation. Oh, there is Lisa. Lisa, if you could unmute.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Thank you for first of all, thank you for holding the forum tonight. I hope that there are many more people on Zoom than in the audience there. I had the Q&A questions, so I'll just ask them. The first is, when will the new values be available online? I know that you said they won't be mailed until December 8th. I thought that they were coming out sooner.
Yeah, we'll be sending them out that week. It might be a little bit earlier, but we typically put the values up on the website as we deliver them to the post office. Right at around the same time you receive your letter with your new value, it will be available online.
Good. So is there going to be raw data available to show average increases in different districts, neighborhoods, single versus multi, commercial properties citywide? Will raw data be available by street? When zoning was making all the changes, you had to go to a map and click on individual properties. It's just so hard to do that. I mean, I'd like to be able to see the changes on my street without having to go to individual properties. So will there be a way to do that? I mean, that would be transparency.
I don't know how to answer that question.
Yeah, we don't.
It's not typical. I don't know if we
Just
can.
to have a place where you can see which street changed, how much each street changed. Yeah, we don't really go down to that detail. Whatever you want to, we can put together whatever old to new values, breakdowns.
Lisa, if you want to email me, send me an email of what it is that you're looking for, and we'll see if we can develop something.
Sure, I can do that. I appreciate. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And then my last question is, so Norwalk has more than a few illegal multifamily homes. Single families with basement apartments, or a second floor converted to an apartment. Two families that are three families. So if you've gotten into these properties, how are you handling the illegal multifamily properties, or illegal additions that were put on houses or changes, are they being reported to the building department? What are you doing with them?
Well, I can tell you, when the staff goes out and visits each property, they have the existing sketch that's on file with the assessor's office. And they'll literally go around the house and see if there's any additions, or has the deck been enlarged, or, oh, that garage fell down, they need to take that off the card. So they do check that detail, and that's one of their primary jobs, is to list all kinds of data.
But are they being reported to the building department?
We report it back to the assessor's office. I don't know that it goes back to the building.
No, it doesn't go back to the building department. It goes to the fire marshal's office. There's a gentleman there that takes care of all the things that have to do with illegal apartments.
So
But
you are sharing information. I mean, it's unfortunate
I
that
report anybody that I find doing something that they're not supposed to do. That's when I find it, I put it on the field card. If it's somebody finished their attic and finished their basement without permits, I tell Bill Ireland and let Bill filter it down to all the rest of the apartments. But if Gary has a group of 2-family homes that are operating as 3s, and everybody that's in this room that's an appraiser, if you ever did work in Bridgeport, you always show up and find out that they have a 3rd floor apartment and possibly a basement apartment. The problem, and this is to what Nora was about to get at, is how do you do it if you're not legally allowed to get in? Then we don't, no, but then we don't know and we can't change it. But if they ever do try to go and sell it, and the next person has an appraiser come in and that appraiser turns them in, because that's what they're at least supposed to turn them into a bank, which becomes a problem because now they can't sell it. The realtor in the front row is mad because he's not getting his commission. They're mad at you for turning them in, but you have to turn them in because it's your responsibility. But if they don't let you in, and hey, anybody that's operating a 2-family house that they're operating as a 3 or a 4, if they're doing it in the basement as well, they're not letting you in unless it's the tenant who just doesn't know any better. So if nobody's home, we can.
Yeah, unless there's anytime there's no trespassing
Or a
signs
gate.
or anything like that, of course we don't, but.
But if it's wide open, because I've been doing this for over 20 years as an assessor. If you knock on a door and nobody's home and I'm there because of a permit, I go in the backyard, I measure your deck, I measure your addition, and I do the best that I can to estimate what went on there. I leave a card asking you to call me. And if you don't call me, I go with my estimation. If you call me, I try to make an appointment and see it. But unless there's a no trespassing sign or a locked gate, we walk around the properties. There's nothing that says we can't. To not allow trespassing, to not allow that kind of access, they have to post it. I've looked into it, trust me, because my building department used to try to tell me 4th Amendment law. I checked with the lawyer. Then I do not walk the property. I knock on the door. I wouldn't lie like that.
There is a statute that governs the ability for the assessor's office to inspect the exterior of properties. It's specified in the law as part of a reassessment process.
Yeah, I mean, you know what, I own a legal 4-family house. I own, we own a few multifamily houses, but I also own a legal 4-family house. So I see the fire marshal every year for an inspection, and we have conversations. And I mean, the only time it seems that when they get into a house that and inspect it, they're not reporting illegal apartments as
Yeah.
long as they're safety equipment. So I mean, nobody's reporting them.
No. Sawyer reports them to me. I get a spreadsheet.
Okay.
This is Nora King. We used to report them all the time. They choose to not.
I,
Thank you. Lisa, do you have any other questions?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's anyone else that likes to speak, please raise your hand now. Seeing none, I will close public participation.
And just real quickly, any follow-up questions or is everybody good?
Sure.
Wait, I can't hear you. I'm loud, but it affects my hearing.
They're based upon the income of those properties.
Those are all income based.
Yes, absolutely.
And then they still are on the tax roll, just like any other property.
Yeah, like any other commercial property.
I'm sorry, you're from the assessor's office?
Yes.
So is there tax credits for these buildings?
Well, and I'm gonna use the one that I know off the top of my head, 123 Water Street. They were on the Enterprise Zone program, which is a state program that Norwalk runs. And they were on, it's a 7-year program where for the first 2 years after it's completed, their assessment was reduced by the building being removed completely for 2 years. And then this year, the 2022 grand list, that's the first year that they started paying taxes on the actual building value. So 50% of the building value was added to their tax bill this year. And then it's a decreasing percentage now. So they were 100% exempted for the building, 100% exempted. Now it's 50%. Next year it's 40%, 30%, 20%, 10%, and then they're the full value. And there are other buildings. There's only like 11 properties in the year and a half that I've been here that are on there's 3 programs. The mall is on one special program. There's a couple other that are on what's called a jobs program. And then there's the remaining 8 that are on just a straightforward
So
enterprise.
it's not every one of these big high rise.
No,
areas
not
that have
every one.
Tax credits. So
No, last year there were 11 that were receiving some sort of credit for being on a state mandated program.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, he gets told.
Yep.
All right. Thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
for
you for
coming.
everybody
Thank
for
you,
coming.
everyone.
For Nora, and we didn't hear your name, but there is the pamphlet that everybody else has. I dropped a few extras off at the counter at the customer service.